Well, it's nighttime, and usually at this time I check my blood sugar before I go to bed to make sure it's nice. So we're going to do that. I have diabetes type 1, and what we diabetics usually use to check our blood sugar with composes of 3 elements. We have a meter, which tells you the number of your blood sugar in milligrams per deciliters, and where the blood is extracted from are called test strips. So you can look in there. That's what they are. That's what they look like up close. This part goes into the meter to be read, and this part's where the blood comes from. And finally, we have the needle, which is installed in here, and the numbers at the top depend on the force that the needle exerts on your finger. So if you have thicker skin, you might need a higher number to make sure you can draw blood. There we go. Alright, and we will see that my blood sugar is 142, which is a little bit high. It's kind of normal in my range for a diabetic, and it requires a correction based on my blood sugar, and this meter automatically connects to my pump, and so my pump knows that my blood sugar is 142, and I just continue, and it offers a correction amount of insulin. And then we disconnect. And that's how I check my blood sugar. Well, it's time to change my infusion set, which for diabetics typically happens every 2 to 3 days when their insulin reservoir runs low. So you need to start over and get a new one. And there are a lot of parts to it, a lot of certain steps that you need to follow exactly. Otherwise, you'll just end up in a bad place. So we start off with a syringe, which we use to drop the insulin, which is in here, this little vial, Humalog. It's the one I use. And so we flip it upside down to try to suck out the insulin. And we need to make sure there's no bubbles in there so it doesn't cause trouble in the tubing. And it's good. And since this is a needle, which is exposed, it is a potential biohazard, so we need to dispose it in a safe disposal, which is a sharps container. And then here is the new tubing that we attach to our cartridge. And this is the inserter, which you use to insert it into the skin. So we need to replace the old one with the new. So basically there inside the pump there's like a little pin that kind of winds back down, because each time you deliver a certain amount of units of insulin, it pushes it up. So every time you get a new one, you have to push it back down. And then we need to fill up the tube with insulin, so when you attach it to yourself, it's not dry and full of air. And here it goes. And basically you wait until you can see little drops start coming out, which means you know it's all full. And you're ready to go. And this is called an IV prep wipe, which it's basically antiseptic and it's sticky. It's an adhesive, so it helps the infusion site stick to the skin. So I usually do my thighs, so I put the infusion set. Some diabetics, they do like stomach, others can do the back of their arms, you can do your back, just basically wherever there's enough fat. And there's a needle. And there it is. And then we need to remove this thingy, which is a needle, so it helps the cannula go in there nice and smooth. And then we need to fill the cannula with some insulin. And that's how you change your pump. As most of what I've showed you, it usually involves my insulin pump. However, for most diabetics, it's not really the case. Typically, before I had the insulin pump, I use this thing called an insulin pen. And basically, what it is, it looks like a pen, and inside it has a cartridge full of insulin. And what you would do is you would basically attach a pen needle to the top, and you would move the dial to whatever amount or units of insulin that you desired after your meal. And typically we do this after every single time you eat, or you're checking your blood sugar and you need to make a correction. And it was kind of painful because that would require at least 5 times a day just sticking yourself with needles. It wasn't fun. And on top of the regular insulin, we would have this thing called Lantus, which is more like a bolus long-term insulin, because your pancreas has 2 functions with insulin. It has the one that treats what you eat immediately, the sugar in your body, and then the other one maintains homeostasis. So this one would help keep your levels under control over long periods of time. And basically we would do the same thing as we did with that pen, and you would move it to whatever amount you needed, and then you would inject. And typically you do this twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. And if your insurance won't cover this type of things, you would typically use the age-old syringe. This is what I started out with in the very beginning when I was first diagnosed with diabetes. And I hated these things. It was just such a pain. So basically you would prep the syringe a little bit, and then you would stick it into your vial of insulin, and then you would draw up the amount. As you can clearly see, this only goes by like every 1 unit, which is very inaccurate if you would like to correctly diagnose yourself with the correct amount of insulin. So it wasn't all too useful. But yeah, that was it. And then you inject yourself with it afterwards. Yep. And so that's what other people use if they don't have the option of the insulin pump.